if you want to be an entrepreneur and you have a great idea and you have a business plan, I'm a teacher from Saskatchewan who completely pivoted and made my own company. So I'm not here. I'm living in a glass house. I'm not trying to throw stones. I just think, tech sexy and entrepreneur sexy. Again, it looks so good on the outside because you're your own boss, you have your own hours, but those are some grueling hours. And again, the buck stops with you. So even, we've been on vacation and shit has blown up. And I mean, like, blown up. And so I couldn't get Wi-Fi in one of our hotels except for in the bathtub. So I would take my pillow at 3 a.m, sit in the bathtub, trying to like fix all this shit. And then come 7 a.m, my family still wants to go out and have fun, right? So it looks sexy and it sounds amazing, and it is for the most part, but man, you get ready for fun. I guess we'll just call it fun. It's a roller coaster.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by TRUFAN. And before we get into today's conversation with Nicole Parmar, there's a couple things that we need to go over first. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to leave us a positive rating and review, share this episode with a friend, and subscribe to the show. I put out brand new interviews every single Monday, and a brand new takeaways episode is an audio exclusive where I sit down and break down the most recent podcast episode of the week every single Thursday. And now, without further ado, I'm very excited to present to you my conversation with Nicole Parmar. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. I am your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by TRUFAN. Today on the show, we are joined by Nicole Parmar, CEO and founder of JNJ Business Strategies. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jacob.
My pleasure. I'm excited to have you here. And where I want to start, I want to go all the way back to the beginning.
Oh,
What were you like as a kid growing up?
awful. I wish there was a different answer for that. I was a terrible child. I think I didn't start being, kind of a decent human being until I was around 20. If we're going that far back. Yeah, I was, I don't know what it was. I didn't really like having people tell me what to do, how to do, why to do. So I rebelled against everything. I'm not sure why. And I think it was 20 that I apologized to my parents for just literally being a hellion. I was just, yeah.
And we can cut this out if you want to, but I found this in a presentation. Was it the two arrests that were kind of the turnaround?
Oh shit. No, I had actually cleaned up my life before then. I was a nicer person before then. The arrest came because I was a minor and I had gone to school in the United States. So the first time I was drinking underage and walking home, but not underage in Canada, underage in the United States. And the second one came from being in a location I should not have been as a minor. And, so that was quite some time ago. And I don't regret my experiences. It made me who I am, but I'm sure I aged my parents a lot. And I am sorry for that.
And school in the States was Minot State, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious because I had a friend who went and played junior A hockey in Minot. I know I grew up in Manitoba. So on multiple people I also know went and played hockey for Minot State. So I'm curious how you ended up there.
So I wanted to go to school to be originally a speech pathologist, but then changed my mind and wanted to work with deaf children. And so the places to do that when I was, younger were UBC and Minot. So Minot accepted me right away. It was exciting, a different country, a different place. And it was great. We spent a lot of time going up to Manitoba to the establishments there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And so I'm curious as to why, at like 18, 19 years old, you decided that teaching deaf children and working with deaf children is what you wanted to do.
Well, I've always had a passion for helping, and I love children to this day. I don't know. It's funny because I never saw myself as a teacher, but then I went on to become a teacher and help deaf children in the classroom, deaf children and hard of hearing children. And yeah, I had some relatives that needed some assistance when they were growing up in our school. Wadena, Saskatchewan, where I was, we had some students, and I got to witness firsthand, I think, what a lack of support professionals can do to education. So I wanted to jump in and help.
And so then it was after you graduated, you moved to Saskatoon, right? And that's where you started teaching?
Yeah, so moved to Minot to do the education, and then moved back to Saskatchewan and found a home base in Saskatoon.
Okay. I've heard you say, like, I think it was the same presentation where I mentioned the arrests. You mentioned being a teacher. You knew almost right away that you didn't want to be a teacher, right? But that would have been around 2006. You were a teacher, I believe, till 2012, 2013. How come you stayed for so long if you knew almost right away you didn't want to be there?
Yeah, so I guess we should say I didn't want to be a teacher. If I could have stayed in the classroom the whole time, I would have taught my whole life. I love the children. I'm still close to most of the students that I taught, and I loved the staff. The politics of teaching didn't sit well with me. The very slow moving, I guess, you know, there's so many components with teaching because there's a school board, there's the federal government, there's the provincial government, and it just felt like everything kept taking away from what I love to do, and that was just be with the kids. So yeah, it was year one that I knew I would not be teaching long term, and I was already planning my next steps of life. And yeah, so I started teaching in 2006, and I left the teaching profession, 2012. Yeah, so in that time, I got a master's, through the University of Saskatchewan, and that was in evaluation and measurement. So
And so what does that look like? What does that master's program look like? Like, what are you actually learning in that?
it's basically statistics.
Okay.
And it was crazy because it took me such a long time to graduate because there was this one class, and it was only ever offered on a Thursday, and it was only ever offered at 2 p.m. And I don't know, I'm going to say this story, and I apologize to anybody who gets in any trouble for this, but I had this incredible principal. His name is Bruce Bradshaw. This man was just incredible. I went to his office one day and I explained my situation. And I just said, I've been trying to finish this. I put in all this extracurricular time. I'm never going to graduate because I can't do this class. And he closed his door, and he just kind of looked at me for a second. And he said, I understand. And he said, yeah, you do extracurricular, you're always here. But if you go and you take this class, you go quietly, you don't tell anybody, you just leave. If anybody ever asks where you are, tell them to come see me. And then he said, but now I'm also going to be seeing you at school dances, school famines, the wrestling team. So for 2 years after that, I got quite a few knocks on my door from good old Bruce Bradshaw. And, I was at every single function you could think of. But yeah, it's thanks to people like that I was able to take that next step in life.
And so ultimately, when you ended up leaving teaching, was that because of Picatic?
Well, so I had actually convinced, I'm not sure how, but I had actually convinced Jayesh to leave teaching with me so I could go do a PhD program.
Phoenix, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to go explore some other options for school. And Jayesh said yes. And lo and behold, Phoenix didn't work out. And so I had a breakdown. So I started crying, thinking I had ruined both of our lives. And I think just as life works out the way it's supposed to, we were free. So we got to go to San Francisco so he could further pick a tick. And it was at that time that I realized everything I had been working on in life. So my communication skills with teaching, interpersonal communication, and the stats degree, it all came together. And what I really loved doing in San Francisco was growth marketing.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit more about when you realized that Phoenix was the wrong decision, and you felt like it was game over essentially. And I feel like that's the fear for a lot of people. When things go badly, they feel like it's just game over. But there's so few things in life that can happen to us that we can't come back from. So ultimately, like, how did you end up, like, was it just moving to San Francisco and then you realized everything was going to work out? Or was it something in Phoenix where you realized, okay, everything's actually going to be okay?
No, so we got to Phoenix, and we were looking at schools, and we were looking at houses and things to buy so that we could kind of get set up and maybe move and get settled and whatnot. And when we were in Phoenix, that's when I literally had my breakdown. We stopped the car driving on the freeway because I was having, when children hyperventilate, cry, and you can't understand them, and it's like, So that was me. And my poor fiance at the time was like, just words. I just need words. Tell me what is happening to you right now. And I had the snot, the tears, the mascara. So very attractive at this point in life. And I just said, we can't live here. I don't know what I did. I ruined our lives. And now I'm sure you're mad at me. And Jay started laughing. And he said to me, it's like, Nick, I don't know how to tell you, but I can't live in Phoenix either. So then we both had a laugh for maybe 5-10 minutes. And then we both had that, oh shit, now what moment. And we went back to Saskatoon, and yeah, he was accepted. Duncan came through Rocket Space, and Duncan liked what he was doing, but said Picatic needed some help and picked us up, and off to San Francisco we went. But see, San Francisco couldn't have happened if we hadn't have quit our teaching job. So back to everything happens for a reason, right?
Mhm. And for everyone that doesn't know, can you just quickly explain what Picatic is?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I don't know if you can see that sign back there. That was one of our first. Picatic was a ticketing company where anybody, so from small little mom and pop shops to large corporations to big venues, could come on and put on an event online, and everything was on their e-commerce. Whatever you needed, you name it. And fortunately for us, Eventbrite also really liked what we were doing and how we were doing. So in 2018, we were acquired by Eventbrite.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And so when you move, so you moved to San Francisco, that's around, again, the same 2012, 2013 timeline?
So that's the 2011. So Jayesh and I got married 2011 on December 31st. And on January 3rd, we were driving to San Francisco.
Okay. Quite a 4 or 5 day time span there. Um, but so I've read somewhere, or I heard somewhere that when you first got to San Francisco, you had trouble getting a job, right? And so that's when you first picked up, I think it was blogging, right?
Yeah. So when we moved to San Francisco, I, I don't think the world had quite come back from the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. Tech was booming, but there wasn't a lot of other sectors. So yeah, I had the hardest time trying to find employment. And I wasn't employable in the tech space because I had no relevant skills. So fortunately for me, my husband believed in me, and he let me be basically employee number 3 with Picatic. And I started doing their blogs, their SEO, their advertising. And the greatest thing about being in San Francisco is everybody is so helpful. So if I needed something, I would reach out to somebody, and they'd be like, oh well, you should talk to my friend so and so, and he works at Google. My friend so and so works at Twitter. My friend so and so. Being in San Francisco when we were was just also serendipitous moment of life, because everybody that I asked for help from was in that company that I was trying to understand. So we actually had a friend from Google sit down and work with me, and it was incredible.
What are some of those early things that those people, either be your friend at Google or people at Facebook, Twitter, what are some of those early things that you learned that still stick with you today?
So I think the best lesson I learned in San Francisco was just pay it forward, because you know um, that person that you're helping who has no idea how to like start an ad, run an ad, could be the next person running a company you want to work for. So the best lesson that I learned in San Francisco was just pay it forward every single day, help whoever you can and as many people as you can. The other thing I learned in San Francisco was to hack everything you can. And I don't mean like literally hack, but I mean life hacks. So if you can save 5 minutes doing this, do it. So it's really about the systems and processes and how much time that saves you. And so I think some of the jokes down there are like, Steve Jobs every day wore his black turtleneck and his jeans. But when you actually think about how much time that takes away from going to your wardrobe, picking out clothes, there's so many ways in life that you can save time. And so I've adopted basically the all black mantra. Throw on something black, it always works. And that has saved me so much time.
Yeah, and it saves you the mental energy to save it for later in the day because it's only finite every day, right? So if you don't have to use it thinking about clothes, like it's just to be used elsewhere.
Yeah, and everything, right? So everything has a place, everything has a system. And then you can just autopilot a lot of your life and then pay attention to the other things you actually need to. So the 80-20 rule.
Mhm. What
Yeah.
are some of those other systems or things you've put in place over the last since San Francisco to even today?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I'm a very type A personality. So everything gets done before it needs to be done. Everything has a place. So everything in our home has a place, everything in the car has a place. Filing systems are huge. So every single thing we do for businesses, it's filed, there's projections. I mean, you name it. And I think I've gone a little bit to the dark side. I think I need to relax in some areas. I'll get there.
But with that too, like I've been reading a lot about being kind of present lately, and like I read a stat that like 95% of what we do in a day is automatic. Like we don't even do it without thinking. So like, how do you kind of balance one wanting everything to be automatic so you're not thinking about it and you can save the energy for later, but also not trying to not be present in the moment because that's also important.
Great question. So my son has actually been the best mirror for that. Um, when he was little, and I thought I could get away with maybe more screen time, more multitasking, he called me out a lot. I would be with him and he would be frustrated and he'd be like, "You're not watching this when you're on your phone. You're not playing with me, you're on your phone." And that just kind of, when you look at that and you hear a little kid telling you that, that's, well, one, it hurts really a lot. But two, it just makes you take stock and makes you realize, who else am I doing this to? So now I have a rule. So when we go to bed, there's no cell phones. I'm not on technology. When I go out for meals with friends, the phone stays in the bag. But if our son is at home, the ringer's turned up in case something should happen, right? And then I don't have to check anything and I can be present. And also when I'm working, I try to just close down every single tab I can and just focus on the one conversation or the one task or the one client we're working with.
That's awesome. And then, so back to San Francisco, you realized after working for Picatic and kind of just being immersed in that environment, essentially, that this is what you wanted to do. That was kind of like, did you know that's what you wanted to do? Or was the light bulb going off being in San Francisco?
So, San Francisco was such a weird time for me because I had just got married. So I was a new wife. I was jobless for the first time in my life since 15. So that took a pretty big, my ego was pretty bruised at that time. Um, the one, I guess, saving grace for me is I had scholarship money thanks to the University of Saskatchewan. I received their graduate scholarship. So I had money to live. But yeah, so San Francisco was a hard time for me, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I couldn't get a job. Nobody wanted me. I didn't have relevant skills. And when I started working with Picatic and when I started advertising and helping some other companies, that was when the holy shit light bulb came off. And that's when I realized that everything I had learned teaching, everything I had learned through psychology and about human behavior, and everything I had learned in the measurement and evaluation courses all perfectly came together to do marketing, right? Because it was like, how do I get this person to do this online? How do I track this information? So yeah, it was in San Francisco where I feel my life finally came together.
Yeah. But insane, like you and Jess and Picatic kind of were on a cross-continental trip for a couple of years, right? Because it was like from Saskatoon to San Francisco, New York, Toronto, Vancouver, right? That was kind of the circuit.
Yeah, so fortunately, unfortunately, I don't know. It was such a wild ride. I just feel so blessed that I got to be on that adventure with my husband. Yes, we went Saskatoon, San Francisco, Saskatoon, Toronto, Manhattan, Vancouver.
So what is like, you say you're fortunate to have gone along that journey, but what is that like constantly having to uproot and move, especially when you're in a new field like that you were just entering in San Francisco, trying to maintain clients and jobs and stuff? Like, how do you kind of handle all of that?
Wine. I mean, for Jayesh and I, we didn't have Jai at the time, our child, who we adore. So for us, it was pretty easy to be nomadic. Jayesh and I are we're pretty open people who love new experiences, love getting to know new people, and we don't have attachment to stuff. So we literally lived out of some very large suitcases, and we just picked up and moved when we had to. San Francisco was great. We met just the best people in San Francisco that we're still really close with. Andrew D'Souza from Clearbank. We love our Uncle Andrew, Haley Mullen. Like we meet all these fabulous people anywhere we went, and it just feels amazing to have friends kind of in all pockets of life now.
That's awesome. And then 2013 was ultimately the year you ended up back in Vancouver, right?
So 2013, we found out that Jai was going to be coming into this world, and we wanted him to be a Canadian-born baby. And so it was comical because at the time we didn't know where to go with Picatic, because Jayesh and I were actually gearing up to move at that time to another location in Manhattan, and we were gearing up for another program there. So we were going to essentially be there for a year. Found out Jai was coming, and Jayesh went back to the investors and said, we don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. And I think one investor laughed at him and said, have you talked to the wives? I think everybody laughed and asked their wives what they wanted, and majority wanted Vancouver. So that's where we came.
Yeah. So 2013 was a pretty big year then. Moved to Vancouver, Jai was born. But then, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2013 was also the year that Picatic got about a week from bankruptcy, right?
Yeah. So that's online too. Yeah. So 2013, Jai was born, and we moved from Manhattan to, so my husband doesn't even move with me. So Jayesh goes to South by Southwest. I move everything from New York to Saskatoon, actually. So I go New York to Saskatoon. Jayesh goes to South by Southwest. We need to go back to Saskatoon to collect our belongings. Jai is born in October. He's a very, very early baby. So, wasn't supposed to come almost till December. So we're going through that. And it was when I went to apply for MAP benefits that we found out that some things had happened in the company. Yeah.
And so I can't even imagine what that's like. How do you kind of push through at that moment? Because baby comes early, you're moving across the country. I can't even process what that'd be like. So how do you kind of push through?
You don't process. At that time, you don't. You literally have to go on autopilot, and it was just a checklist of shit that needed to be done and kind of timelines. And then when everything was over and we knew everything was going to be okay, then you can go back and process and kind of do a post-mortem. But yeah, when you're going through it, you are just moving.
I have a quote here from you that I wrote down that I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
The quote is, "My biggest failures are actually more important to me than my successes." And I'm curious why that is.
For me, I don't learn a lot when I'm succeeding. And when I'm succeeding, there's a lot of praise and, there's a lot of congratulations, and there's not a lot of pushback or feedback. And when I'm failing, well, first of all, failures smack in my face, so I can't hide from it, but there's a lot of room for growth. And so for me personally, when I'm failing, I am learning so much. And when I'm failing, I'm getting pushed even further out of my comfort zone. I have to ask for help a little bit more. That's a weak spot for me because I don't really enjoy asking for help. I'm doing better with that now, but I just feel that I don't want to burden people with that. So yeah, when I'm failing, I am learning the most, and I am growing the fastest.
Do you have a favorite failure?
Oh God, there's so many. We could figure all it. So I launched a course for realtors, and it was great. We had some sales. It wasn't losing money, but it wasn't making money the way I had expected and wanted it to. And what I learned through that whole process was something that I preach all the time. So I always tell clients, and I always tell people that I work with or support, is to really nail down your persona. Who are you selling this to and why? And do they want it? Have you done the client work, et cetera, et cetera? So I preach this all the time. And that was the one thing I didn't nail with this company. And so it really was a humbling experience. And it taught me to practice what I preach at all areas of life and make sure that next company that we started, and we started another one, is that the very first thing we do is a whole bunch of user testing. And we make sure that the users that are coming are just filling us with critical feedback. This is when they want to hear about all the things we're doing wrong, all the things we're doing great, and what you want to see us improve on. And so with our new company, before we launched, we had over 200 people do that for us.
That's awesome. That's Gunkii, right? Gunkii?
Yeah.
With the failures though, when it happens, is it kind of like a sit down, have that postmortem, maybe write things down, or is it just kind of like just internal thing, like you realize what went wrong, and so when it comes down the line, similar to a Gunkii, to do this, or do you actually take a moment to try and unpack why things didn't go the way you thought they would?
Yeah, I unpack a lot. I also internalize a lot too. So, where did I go wrong? How could I have improved? Trying to do better at that at life, just making sure that first I take responsibility for everything, and then I can make sure that maybe the systems I put in place, or if there was other people involved, it's still my fault if we failed, but like, how could I have done better? And I think for me, that has just helped grow our other companies exponentially. And so we run a team of 6 now for the other companies, and we're having zero problems. And it is through those learning experiences, right? And for that digital marketing course, it really worked in a silo. I really just wanted to do that on my own. And again, if I would have asked for help sooner, if I would have had a more transparent workspace at the time, it could have been more successful.
Mhm. So you started when you first officially started your company, that was 2015. Was that when it officially started?
Uh, the marketing one or Nicole?
Yeah. Like, yeah, Nicole Parmar Co.
Yeah.
That was 2015, right?
So officially, we actually launched when Jai was born out of a necessity. We did not incorporate it until 2015.
Mm.
We ran it as just like a solopreneur company.
And so how long did you have the idea for wanting to start your own marketing company before actually putting it into practice? Because I feel like a lot of people say, I want to start a company, I want to build this, I want to do this, but people don't actually follow through on it. So how long did it take you to have the idea then to executing on it?
So I worked for, it's going to be a long and short answer, but I worked for a couple of marketing companies. I knew I wanted to do it on my own after my experiences in San Francisco, Toronto, and Manhattan, but I didn't know how. And so I worked for a couple of marketing companies in and around Vancouver. And I at that point too, I really wrote down what companies were doing well, maybe what they could have improved upon, not because they needed to, but what I would want for my own company. Best practices, some gaping holes in my knowledge. Like, I really needed to get a better hold and a better understanding of financial literacy at that time. And so I just kind of worked through that and made sure I had people and systems in places before I launched. And then when we launched, it was, I don't want to say easy, like, it wasn't easy, but it was easier because we had taken such a long time to set up everything before we actually did launch. We didn't launch and then hope it would work. We made sure everything was set up so that we could have success.
So what does that look like when you say you have people and processes in places? I mean, you're kind of like building the team before you actually take the jump. Like, for example, I have a friend who built an entire marketing agency, but didn't go full time. Like, he worked his government job and still did all the marketing stuff on the side to make sure like he had success when he took that jump. Was that something similar that you did?
100%. That's exactly what we did. And I also, just as I mentioned, I didn't have financial literacy. So making sure I had, a part-time CFO, an accountant, a bookkeeper, and people who would keep me on track in that area. So when tax season came, this wasn't a problem. We made sure that we had contracts with everybody because those are crucial. So we made sure that we had built templates for contracts with clients, contracts with employees, contracts for contract workers. Everything was just meticulously done and then organized in Dropbox and Google Drive so everybody could find what they needed at the time.
I was going to ask then if it was scary to finally take that jump to doing it full time, but it sounds like, was it still scary or was because everything was so set up, it was almost like a seamless transition?
It was just kind of a seamless transition. At that time, we had already gone through scary with Picatic and a move. I mean, at that point, I don't know how much scarier life could have got. So yeah, we were
Okay.
ready.
Yeah. Do you still, despite having everything in place, is there still some form of imposter syndrome? I've talked to people recently on the podcast about imposter syndrome and always kind of doubting yourself. Is that something you've ever had to deal with despite having everything set up and ready to go? Like, was that something you still had to push through?
So I don't feel imposter syndrome because I don't jump into things that I don't know, or if I don't know what I don't know, I'm very clear on that. Where I can offer value, I'm very transparent and I want to help people. Maybe for imposter syndrome, for me, it happened in San Francisco when I had just first started and I didn't know a lot of things and I was still trying. But at that part, I didn't really feel imposter syndrome. I just felt that I was so far behind the game that I just had a really long runway of catch up to do, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so what's your advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, especially right now, kind of in a world, I know we're kind of hopefully, knock on wood, kind of on the horizon coming out of a COVID world. But like, what's your advice for people that want to start? Like the quote, I believe, unlike in our first initial call, I wrote it down because I like somebody. Sometimes it just needs 6 seconds of bravery. So like, what are those things that your advice to aspiring entrepreneurs right now?
So if you want to do it, just, I'm going to steal this one from Nike, but just do it. Come up with a plan, figure out how. If you really want to have a marketing company, I suggest first of all working for a few, just so that you know the ins and outs. And it's hard. Running your own business is very hard comparatively to working for somebody. So understand what comes with that. Team management, the tools, the cost, the overhead, knowing that you no longer get to walk away, because if it's midnight and somebody's website crashes or their ads break down, like that falls on you. So if you want to do it, put a plan in place, find some really great people who are in the space that might take you under their wing and support you. And then set like a Gantt chart of, the things you need when you would like to achieve them, and go. I mean, anybody can do anything. I'm a firm believer in that. If you want it bad enough, you will find a way to get it done.
I think the one thing I want to kind of unpack from that is when you're talking about the advice you said, if you want to start a marketing company, maybe work for a marketing company first. And that to me makes it sound like it's someone that doesn't actually work in marketing yet. So talk about the non-linear path, and not everything is a straight line. And can you talk about that for a sec?
Well, I mean, I'm the perfect example of who I started here and ended here, or getting close to here. You have to put yourself out there, and if you don't know marketing and you've never been in marketing, you can't expect to go into a job asking for 100K. You might have to be, a student and go in there with no money, but just to get that work experience. You need to hone your skills. And there's so many free classes, there's paid classes, HubSpot has classes, Facebook has classes, Google has classes. You don't have to start from scratch. You just have to be willing to put in your reps. You just have to be willing to take the time to do what you need to do. And yeah, if you want to work in marketing, ask to work for a marketing company, and not just one, because you might work for one and it might be the best company you've ever worked for, and you see how smooth it runs and you think that's going to happen to you. I suggest then maybe working for somebody who's not operating that way to see what can go wrong.
With putting yourself out there, I feel like a lot of people don't want to because it's outside their comfort zone. So what have you done over the course of your journey to become more comfortable stepping outside of your comfort zone?
Well, I failed a lot. There's a lot of failure before I got to where I was. But you just, I heard this quote somewhere, and I don't know who said it. It's not mine. But I heard that you will never be criticized by someone doing more, only by someone doing less. And so people who are trying to get to that next level know that they have to pay it forward and pay it back in order to help others succeed. And I just feel that if you want to take that step, get some bravery and know that you might fail. And even in life, I still hear a lot of no's before I ever get to the yes. But I just think that one no is a stepping stone to get to my yes. So you have to know that the no's are coming and you can't take it personally.
And oftentimes, to kind of have a failure, you have to take a risk in the first place. And a lot of people are, I mean, myself included, risk averse. And I think to me that I attribute that back to being in school and being so afraid of failing in class that like I would do everything not to fail. And I feel like that's translated itself to my adult life now. But so how have you become more similar to stepping outside of your comfort zone? How have you become more comfortable with taking on risk?
So at first it was scary, and at first I didn't want to fail. And I mean, how sad is that school sets us up that way? Failure shouldn't be something that one, we're afraid of, or two, that is so frowned upon. Failure should just be what it is. You failed. It's a data point. How can you turn that around? Or what will you learn, from that? What's the lesson that you can take to the next step? And I feel that if you fail, the ego gets bruised, everything gets hurt, but other people have been there. And the people that have failed, we don't even think twice about that. The question we ask is, how can we help you? Like, what's the next thing we can do to get you going again? And so if people are afraid of that, they should just remember they're not alone. More people have failed than succeeded initially. And anybody who you listen to, like Walt Disney was told he wasn't creative, he didn't have imagination, nothing he did was going to work, right? Michael Jordan was told by his high school coach that he wasn't going to make it. And I mean, if you look at anybody who really wanted something in life, you just have to know if you believe in yourself, if you trust yourself, you can't listen to all the people who say no, because if you stopped every time you heard no, you would never get anywhere.
Yeah. A quote I like from Manny, who we both know, was people said no. People said no to Uber. People said no to Airbnb, and they turned out all right if you think about it. You know.
They sure did. People said no to Airbnb. People said no to Slack. Stuart Butterfield turned out all right too.
Yeah. No, 100%. And one thing that I find is just wildly impressive, because especially because I've been doing this, my own business, full time since June, and I just seeing the amount of hours that go into it and everything. Can you talk to me about how you balance being an entrepreneur, living with a fellow entrepreneur, and having a family? Like, I can't even figure out how that possibly works. Like, how do you make all that happen?
So it is having the most staunch, what I'll call, segmented life ever. So everything kind of runs on a unit economic. My days, my weeks, my months are lined out. We know exactly what's going to happen, and then it's just being really efficient with my time. So while I'm working out on the treadmill, it's like getting the little tedious tasks done that I don't want to do in a day. And then when I'm momming, and when Jai goes to bed at 7, it's usually back to work and planning the next day, planning the next week, and finishing anything that needs to be done. The best thing about my situation is, like you said, my husband is a fellow entrepreneur. And so he gets that when you need to work, you need to work. And I feel that maybe it might be hard if I didn't have him as a partner, because I'm not sure somebody else would understand how much work needs to be done to keep things running smoothly.
Is part of that too, with like having everything so regimented, is part of that setting boundaries with your clients?
Boundaries with clients, boundaries with friends, boundaries with everything. Yeah. And then making sure to take just a moment every day. I take about a half an hour every day of just no calls, no interruptions. Sometimes I meditate. Sometimes I just lay down. just take a moment to myself. Yeah.
How do you maintain those boundaries? Because sometimes I find it's easy to say I have this boundary, but then as soon as a client needs something, I just tear that wall right down and I'm back to work. Like, how do you do good job maintaining those boundaries?
So we're very clear. We're very clear with our set hours, how we work. That all goes back to contract work. So before we even get into this relationship together, what's expected of us. I used to be the same. I used to jump on weekends and work, and 1 a.m, or if a client was up at 6 a.m. Eastern time, I would get up and make sure things were done. And you'll burn out, or maybe I would burn out. And so I just have boundaries now. My working hours are between 9 and 2:30, and then again between 7 and 9:30. That's when I work, because I'm not with my son. And then on weekends, it's family time. It's time to decompress. So I fully believe if you are working your hours and you are being diligent with what you need to do, you can get everything done at that time.
I love that. And so then talk to me about what with Nicole Parmar Co. What can you explain the business and all the services that you offer?
So with our digital marketing company, what we do is we help companies find growth. So we work with, we go right from start to finish. So we can help you with branding, logo, design, website, and then we flip over to do the advertising, account-based marketing, whatever it is you need to find that growth. And then we finish with automation, a little bit of AI. We make sure everything is automated that can be, so that you as a business owner can go back and focus on your business. And yeah, we also do some blogging in there, a little bit of content writing. Yeah, we kind of hit the whole gamut.
Yeah. Did it start that way or has it evolved over time?
It has evolved, and that goes back to having the best teammates. I mean, our company does what it does because of the team. I just get out of their way. I'm usually the blocker. Amanda does website development and design, and I've never worked with somebody as amazing as her. Amy does a lot of the design, branding, logo. Haven't worked with anybody as amazing as her either. We have Raji, who does a little bit of the more in-depth, more invasive, like AI automation. We have our CFO, we look at it as a company because of what they do. They are just amazing.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
so do you still do like, are you still involved day to day in like the execution, or are you more so from like a strategy side and like a management side now?
Well, I take on management strategy and a lot of the growth. So I'll still do a lot of the advertising and then a lot of client relationships. And that's just because I like people and I want to make sure we're educating them as they go.
And how did you get the first couple clients? I feel like for people listening, that's always the biggest question is, okay, I want to start this marketing agency. I have the skills, I have the ability. Now I just need the clients and I don't know where to find them.
Great question. So I just told everybody that would listen to me, my friends, my family, people I would meet at coffee shops that would be talking and be like, oh, hey, I can help with that. Really, I mean, at some point, I'm sure I was like pretending to sell sunglasses, like, you want it, I got it. And so I was lucky because some of our friends were like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So I got the very first contract I got was at a Halloween party. So we just launched. I was at a Halloween party talking about what I do, and I landed 2 clients that night. And then when the first client had me out to do a meeting with them, they had some other people in the room that they were working with. And I gave my presentation, and I showed what we were doing, and we showed how much growth they had had. And one of the gentlemen at that meeting came up to me and said, okay, we're working together. Send me a contract. And I kind of laughed and I said, don't you want to know more about me or what I do? He's like, nope, looks good. So then I got my third one. And then word of mouth built. And I'm very fortunate that we have built our company on word of mouth.
No, that's just it. Like that's what I tell people when because I was working when I started my marketing agency, I was doing on the side, and I felt like I couldn't like publicly broadcast that I was actively trying to work to leave my job. So I was keeping on the side, and eventually when I did take that step and I started telling people that I had this agency, it just went like super quick. Because now that everyone knew, people whenever like I would come, like they'd think of me when they were trying to think of someone to do this. So that's that's such good advice. I think that's just word of mouth is everything.
Hey,
It's
congratulations to your quick growth as well. That's
uh,
awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a little overwhelming, but it was cool. Another question for people that want to do this that just need some questions answered. How do you figure out what to charge? That was one thing that I struggled with for a very long time. Is because there's no there's no website I can go to. This is exactly what you should charge for this service and this service. So how did you figure that out?
Okay, so this is going to be a loaded question, and we got a lot of pushback. We started charging 125 an hour. And we soon realized that that wasn't enough because of everything that you know how invasive this can get, and just how much time can go into when things don't work properly. So I went online and found what I will call like the average cost. So we started charging 125 an hour, but realized that couldn't cover everything we needed. It wouldn't cover the tools, wouldn't cover salaries, anything we needed. So we doubled down right away. So then we went to 200 plus. And clients were still on board and not batting an eye, not a big deal. So then we pushed it to 4. Clients were still completely fine. We pushed it to 5 an hour, and we got a little pushback, and then COVID hit.
Mhm. That reminds me a little bit of like Gary V talking about how he first figured out how to charge for his speaking gigs.
Yeah.
And he said like, yeah, it's $5,000. The guy goes, great, $5,000 for an hour. And Gary realized how fast he agreed to it. And he was like, oh, for an hour, I meant $5,000 for half an hour. And he was like, hey, great, $10,000 for the whole thing, no problem. And like just kind of throwing it out there and seeing how people react is ultimately how they kind of figured it out. So I just think that's important for people to hear. Is it's almost just a matter of just trying and testing, and even on the charging front, just seeing what works, seeing how people respond, and kind of adapting from there.
100%. So you just have to find that what the market can bear, right? So if you know the average of what people are charging is 125, and you know that a lot of people are fine charging or you're paying 250, if your work is that great and you're doing that much work for them, then charge it.
Mhm. And you
Yeah.
mentioned a little bit earlier that you made real estate courses. That came shortly after like incorporating the business, right? You did that within a year after, I believe.
Yeah.
What was the intent for the courses? Was it almost to act as like a form of funnel to end up leading people back to Nicole Parmar Co, or was it a completely separate entity?
It was a completely separate entity, still under kind of the JNJ umbrella. But what we found when we started building our marketing company is we had so many realtors that needed help. But as a rule of thumb, we will never take on competitors in spaces. For me, I just don't feel that's fair, because I know what everybody else is doing then. And I never wanted to be questioned about nepotism, favoritism, so um, we had a backlog of realtors who would say, you know, as soon as you're done with so and so, come work with me. As soon as you're done with so and so, come work with me. And we couldn't keep up, and we felt pretty bad. And so we built these courses to help them, or so I thought it was going to help them, because they kept telling me they wanted all this stuff. So we built these courses, we got everything online, and mistake number one, what I realized is realtors don't want to do this. They want to sell houses, they want to meet people, they don't want to take the courses. What I realized number two is they weren't so keen on their assistants taking it, because once their assistants learn to do digital marketing across any platform, they didn't necessarily have to stay. So that was my failure, as I mentioned before. I really didn't read that space right, and I really didn't have a handle. I took all the information, but I had a really big blind spot that I didn't prepare for. So we shut that down. We helped everybody who was in the courses. We made sure that everybody had completed and understood, and then we shut down that side of the business. And we still haven't taken on those realtors either, because we still have our initial realtors that we've been working with for 5 years now.
Could you somehow, within that given situation, create some form of referral business where you're referring all these realtors to trusted agencies and you getting a commission off of that? Is that something you've explored?
Yeah, so I have explored that with other people, and I've had a few conversations about referral fees, but they don't like that. And not saying it doesn't work for everybody, but the people that I wanted to work with didn't like the referral cost, because anybody can break a contract after 30 days. So if they've already paid me and then client X leaves, you know, so they just didn't think it would work well. And I also never wanted to be in a position where somebody thought I took advantage of them. So yeah, we just didn't do referral based.
Mhm. Okay. And is there a plan to bring back the courses in a repackaged, remarketed way, or is it kind of just something you're moving on from?
The courses will not be coming back. We have our digital marketing company. We have our JNJ Binks books. We have Gunkii. I have a 7-year-old. I have reapplied to get back into my PhD program. You know, I think for now I'm tapped out. I don't think there's a lot more capacity here to take on anything else.
I mean, I think that's pretty understandable, all things considered. Um, but the original reason that you started the courses in the first place was because demand was so high amongst realtors. So was that kind of a niche for a while, or even still today, what your main focus was working with realtors, or is it just all kinds of businesses just happen to be realtors?
We support all kinds of businesses. We've helped farmers. We've helped lawyers. I mean, whatever sector you could think of, we're helping optometrists. But we had so many realtors coming to us because we really changed. So a couple of the companies we were working for, to other people, I guess their ads stood out. The content was different. Form fills were pretty different, and other realtors wanted that. But yeah, we couldn't take them on, and yeah.
Mhm. And I found this in a 2019 interview that every realtor you worked with became a top realtor in their brokerage, which I mean is some pretty solid social proof. But to get there, you start at the beginning with a SWOT, right?
Yeah, so we do SWOT. We make sure that you understand all of that. We make sure, as a realtor, you are really fighting against a lot of people who are doing the same thing. And for some of the towns, there are a lot of realtors. I'm actually shocked by some of the numbers. And so yeah, start with, you know, like, what are your threats? What are your opportunities? Maybe there's an area that people are working on that you can work on. You know, I don't want to give away any secrets here, but one of the companies that I was helping, we focused on not downsizing, but right sizing your home. So what we did is we really focused on kind of the baby boomers, or the people who would be changing their homes, but not talking about how they needed to downsize. We really highlighted the fact that your life has changed, and maybe you need a big entertainment space, or maybe you need a whole bunch of little bedrooms now because you have lots of grandkids. And so let's right size your home. And that worked very well for us.
With the SWOTs and working with each client on a SWOT, are there commonalities between a lot of realtors where they have similar weaknesses or similar strengths that you've seen over time?
So every agent is different. You know, some agents they're just so charismatic that their presence with people just draws them in. But then they could be really shitty at tracking this information. And so they leave deals on the table because they forget to write things down. Or I've worked with agents who are so good with numbers, and they know every stat from every neighborhood about every house ever sold. but then their personal skills are actually what we're working on because that's what's going to close the deal. So I wouldn't ever say anybody is the same, but when we're working on our threats, there is an area where threats are typically the same, and it's how do you always stand out above that crowd, because it is very noisy online, offline, with bus advertising, online ads, everywhere. So I think the biggest threat is standing out above the crowd.
One of the best results, I think this was in the same interview, was that one of your best results was a client who was blacklisted by Google and ultimately ended up working with them when they kind of came back from that. First off, how do you get blacklisted by Google?
I don't know. Their web guy so when I mean blacklisted, I mean like they had you would type in their name, you would type in anything that happened to them, and nothing would show up. They had a web developer guy who was working with them, and he was using some really old school techniques. So whatever was new in the news, he would type in the back end of their system. So it'd be like, if Beyonce was big in the news, he'd be like, Beyonce knows blah, blah, blah. And so obviously in 2020 people, or even 2015, that's not how you do SEO anymore. That's so, yeah. So we really had to take it back. We had to resubmit sitemaps. We got them a brand new website. We did a lot of fixing for a couple of years. Yeah.
And so for realtors, is LinkedIn still the number one platform they should be on?
So for realtors, LinkedIn is great for growing your presence in a community, but people are still looking at houses on Facebook and Instagram, right? Like if you think of how you interact with those platforms, you might not go to Facebook to find a realtor, but if you're looking for a house and you're mindlessly scrolling on Facebook and you see a house that fits what you've been looking for, you'll still click and go. So LinkedIn is great for the community building, having that social presence, but Facebook and Instagram are still really great for highlighting houses.
With LinkedIn specifically, with kind of building the community there, being a thought leader, I'm curious how you're able to convince realtors to do that. Because, like you said, they just want to focus on selling homes and doing that. How do you convince them to do the upfront work to build a community, establish a presence that will, on the back end, help them sell homes, but it comes with a lot of upfront value providing first?
So you just show them some stats from online, and you also just explain about, with anything in life, for big purchases, you're not rushing into a store and dropping $800,000 on an item. It's going to take some reps again. You're going to have to build a relationship. There's going to have to be trust and mutual understanding. And so with LinkedIn, when we were attempting to get realtors on that, it was really slow moving at first. But one of our clients now is going to be working with a large land developer just through relationships he built on LinkedIn. Another one of our clients is working with banks and is going to be working with foreclosures because of that forethought in that. Again, the posting of that and being a thought leader in that area, because we know that that's going to be coming. We know foreclosures will be happening. So this client, we're like, why don't you jump on that? Why don't you get information, talk to banks, ask if you can be the go-to? And he did.
Awesome. And so what does being a thought leader look like? Like, it's obviously not just posting about your listings and everything. So what does that look like in practice?
So a thought leader, you have to take a stand. So you have to be ready to be wrong. Again, you have to be ready to hear some comments that you might not like. You have to be honest about your positioning and how you got there, why you got there, and then talk about the metrics, right? So don't just come with your opinions and ideas. I mean, those are a dime a dozen, but come with your metrics, your statistics, and then hold your position. And even if you're wrong, again, how you got to that process might be correct, but just the result was wrong, right? So that's how we tell people: pick a position, get some data, get some stats, and then hold strong.
Love to talk a little more about data and stats, because you are very much a kind of an analytical first thinker with your degree or your master's measurement. And trying to figure out how to ask this question properly. How do you, when you're working with a client, do they have to have metrics first in order for you to work with them? Or can you start with someone from like a clean slate?
So wherever you are and wherever we meet, that's your baseline. So if you have zero data, great, we'll build that for you. If you have some baseline data, let's make sure it's kind of the information we need. And if you have metrics and if you already have the data, the statistics, that makes my job so easy.
And is it website data? Is it social data? Is it a bit of everything? Like, what exactly are you looking at with the clients?
Well, it depends on what we're doing for them, right? So if we're building you a website and you want more traffic, we really want to understand what's happened on your website, page views, bounce rates. We add Hotjar, like what were the cookies you had on your website? Did you do remarketing? If we're diving in for advertising, what's your average revenue per user? What's your cost per acquisition? What's the lifetime value? What's your churn rate? What's your burn? All those things. So again, it just wherever you are, we'll meet you there, and then we'll build.
Wow. Okay. That's just sounds, I mean, I can understand why with the real estate courses, how they didn't want to take them because it just, hearing that quick breakdown just sounds like so much work. So I could understand to some degree why, if they like, even once they learn that, they don't want to put that into practice themselves, which is why they come to someone like you and you just knock it out of the park for them. They don't have to worry about it at all.
So where were you 2015 when I was doing this, right? Why weren't you helping me realize?
A lot of when you say you'll come to people, like you'll meet them wherever they are in terms of their data and their analytics and things like that. I've heard you say that a lot of the people when they first come to you, they don't have a plan, which is funny when you think of someone who's a realtor running a business, but there's no actual plan. They're just kind of operating with no destination. That could even be running in circles essentially. So why do you think so many people come to you without even a plan in place? I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm going to choose my words carefully here, but um, working with a lot of companies that I work with, it is actually shocking how much of a lack of a plan there is. So there's no, I'll start working with companies, and the first thing I'll say is, well, pull open your org chart. Let me see who I should be talking to about this, like especially large teams, and they don't have an organizational chart. I'll say, okay, like, I ask if they've done a RACI or a DACI, like who's responsible, who's accountable, who's been consulted, who's informed on this. I don't have that done. I'll jump in to try to find some files. And as we spoke about previously, we're very firm on how we do filing at our organization and our company. And they have shit everywhere. And so the very unfortunate part for that is when people come to me without a plan. One, I'm shocked. As soon as I get over the initial shock reaction, I don't think people realize how much time and money is then not wasted, but needs to be redone to set this up, because you really can't move forward without a plan. And it'd be like getting in a car and wanting to drive from here to Florida, but not understanding which direction you're going or how you're going to get there, or the budget that you need to get there, right? It would be just jump in, go, pray for the best. You might make it, you might not. I'm sure I'll get to Florida, but with people, it's interesting because it also gets messy the more team members they have. Like sometimes there's not alignment, or one of the founders works in a silo, and there's not an open plan for moving forward. And yeah, so we do work a lot on strategy, but it does shock me every single time I get a team and they have zero planning done.
And so how do you kind of create that plan? Is it like just kind of getting the founders or the management in a room and just kind of hashing it out until everyone's in alignment? Or like how do you go from no plan to having like a crystallized plan? This is our North Star. This is what we're working towards.
I love that you use the North Star analogy. Again, we meet people where they are. So if they don't even have company alignment, or if they don't really know what they're doing, we start there. If it's more so a plan and a strategy around marketing, we start there. If it's more so a plan for sales and how to align sales and marketing, we start there. And yeah, we meet people where they are.
With having a plan, do you have to also kind of teach your clients to an extent how to iterate out of that plan if things change? Because like with following the North Star, sometimes things might change and you have to take a different path. Like I was reading the book, I think it was called Unfuck Yourself by Gary John Bishop. He was talking about sticking to a plan too loyally is like rowing in a canoe, falling out of the canoe and still trying to row your way to shore, even though you're not in the canoe anymore. So how do you kind of teach your clients to be able to adapt as things change, and that we might need to iterate on this plan as we go?
Yeah, that's great. So we always talk about working in quarters. And so we talk about how we're going to set these goals, we're going to try this. And then we always say, whatever the data says, that's the direction we're moving in. And so people don't get married to one idea or one plan or one strategy, because the data speaks louder than we ever could. And so if you were really married on just having advertising on Instagram, and we come back and say 0 clicks on Instagram, 0 conversions, but we showed you the 900 that came from LinkedIn, you would very quickly change your plan too.
As a marketer, especially a data-driven marketer, where do you land on with data, consumer data privacy?
So am of two minds of that. Obviously, you can appreciate that. As a marketer, I want to know everything about you. I want to know your age, your race, your education, and not because of anything, but because then I can send you everything that I think you're interested in. As a human being with a child who is 7, and I don't want you to be that invasive, I'm so glad we're definitely pushing back hard, but I have not found a way to to meet those minds together yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those two minds kind of conflict a little bit then.
Oh, they can work hard every day. Yeah. As a marketer, I need that information, right? Like we need to know everything about you. I want to know when you're on the website. Did you come from a mobile device? Did you come from your desktop? How long did you stay on there? What did you click? What did you put in your basket? And then as a mom, I'm like, no, shouldn't be doing any of that. But yeah. So it's definitely conflicting here.
And so then what's your kind of social usage right now? Like, do you use it actively? Is it just kind of like, you have to be there because of the business, but other than that, like you're not really on it. Like, what is your personal usage of social right now?
Yeah, I have definitely stopped using social media. I use it for clients, obviously, for all of our companies. I post moderately. Engagement with me, if you're the top 5 or 10 that show up on my feed, I'll quickly like, so people will know I'm there, and then I'm off. Yeah, I think that, oh, this is probably, I feel that life is moving so fast for us right now. And for me, spending time on social media is almost wasted time. Not that it is wasted time. And I don't mean to shun anybody who's spending time on the platforms. If you're an influencer, if that's how you're making money, I mean no disrespect. Just for me in my life where I'm at right now, it's not a good use of time.
How have you seen it impact, like you said, it's a waste of time. Have you seen it impact your productivity? I just read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, and one of the chapters in there is about a limit and deleting your social media. It's like, how have you seen your productivity and your ability to get into flow improve since going off social?
It's huge because social media is such a good distractor. And Facebook built Facebook with psychologists, and they did everything to get those hits of dopamine to make it addictive, right? Like these people are smart. They are keeping you on there for a reason. And so for me, productivity has gone up. Also, just how I feel has gone up, because again, there's not a lot of people posting their sad life reels on Instagram or Facebook. It is the highlight reels of everything that goes well. And that's not life. And if we celebrated more realistic things, failures, then maybe we would be in a better spot socially.
Yeah. With going off social, but running kind of a marketing business, I interviewed Jason Portnoy on here a few weeks ago. He's the founder of Jport Media out of Montreal. And his thing is like, he kind of wasn't really doing social, but now he's going heavy on social because his thing is best known always beats the best. So how do you kind of balance wanting to stay off of social media, but also wanting to promote, so to make sure your business out there publicly, like we talked about, talking about your business helps people find you. So how do you kind of balance those two things, wanting to be known, but also wanting to take time off the platforms?
So the great thing is I don't need to be known. Like I suggested, is we have referral, word of mouth, and that keeps our business going. So we're very fortunate. For other people that may not be the direction you can go in, and so you will need to be loud on social. So how I use social media now is very specific. I am on the back end. I'm not on the front end. I'm in the back end of Facebook Business or Facebook Ads platform. I'm in the back end of Google Ads, Google Analytics, and Instagram. Sometimes I go on because I really love, for me, like I can see my family and what they're doing, especially during COVID. So I kind of do scroll through there, but I get it. If you're building a business, you need to be inside in mind, because if you're not on there, people may think, like if you're so good, why don't you have this? Or if you're so good, why don't you do this?
Mhm. I'm gonna say with you, I love the way you organize your Instagram, where it's like location, photo, look. I thought that was unique. I'd never seen it before. I thought it was super cool.
It's actually organized in a very specific way. So I used to use hashtags, and the hashtags I would pull those hashtags and get books printed, and those are Jai's baby books. So between the ages of 0 and 12 months, he has this book. Between the ages of 12 months and 24 months, this is his book. And now when I do it, I go in those year sections so that I can have those years of our lives, and we can have coffee table books, and we can remember the great things we do. And I try to stay off of there, so it's not really my face. It's more of the memories that I want to see with my family, my friends, the trips we've taken. And I really only post trips because the day-to-day life is great, but it's the trips that I want to remember and pull information and have those books from.
That's super cool. Because like I've been wanting to have more like photo albums, you know? Because I mean, like, everything's in your phone. Like I've heard horror stories of people with all their photos on their phone and they drop their phone in the tub or something, and all those photos are just gone. You know?
Well, you have your phone backed up. You know that you can have all of your photos go into Google and you will
Mhm.
never lose them. Yes, make sure to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, I've got that set with my phone, but like I want to start because it's cool to also look at like my grandparents pulled out a bunch of old photo albums, and I was like, no one has photo albums anymore. So I think that's such a cool idea how you did that with Instagram.
Yeah.
And so, did it pull that automatically? You said like use the specific hashtags and it gets pulled automatically, or how does that work?
Hashtags where I can go back and do segment of time, which is how I do it now. So I'll do like 2019 and then it ends in 2018. As you were on there, you can see 2020 it died. Nothing's out there. Yeah, so looking forward to hopefully being able to post some more trips. And also it's just a fun way of my mom and dad. That's it's mostly they get to see our life too. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
amazing. I want to talk a little bit specifically about social media content for people that are trying to be influencers, or not influencers, but just thought leaders and things like that. Is it quantity or quality?
Quality. I mean, if you think of, so let's say that I was following you, and let's say that every day you were posting things, but it was somewhat relevant, or it was just you talking, or when you were talking, it was always about the same thing. I'm probably going to tune you out. Not because I don't like you, but just because, you know what I mean? Like our brains just go on autopilot then, and we just assume that it's going to be the same. So when you're posting on social media, I would say quality. And, when it's on the internet, it's out there. So if it's quality, you're never going to have to worry about looking back and doing the old, oh, why?
And you also don't want it to be random acts of marketing.
You don't want to do random acts of marketing, and you really want to read the space, right? Like if something is happening in the world, you want to be sensitive to that.
And I never actually, so random acts of marketing, I never heard that before until I heard you say it. Could you kind of explain to people what random acts of marketing is? Because when I first heard, I was like, that is brilliant. I love that. Can you just explain that to people listening?
Random acts of marketing is having this great idea and pushing it out there before giving it a lot of thought. It's random. It may or may not be on brand. It may or may not fit the tone of your company or your persona, and may or may not do more damage than you had hoped. Yeah. The random post.
Uh, Which I mean, like, I love that. What's the balance of not wanting to do random acts of marketing, but also want to always be testing and throwing things out there to see what works? Because social is always changing.
So, but there's a rhyme and a reason for testing, right? Like you do A/B split testing, you do multivariate testing. Testing is one thing. Throwing spaghetti at the wall is another. But when we're still doing that, there's still a rhyme and a reason. And so, what is your KPI OKR? Like, what are you trying to achieve with this post? If it's just to make people angry and you've done that, then great. I saw a quote on Facebook that said, "Life is short. You should spend time arguing with people socially online." But make sure you have KPIs, OKRs, and then test what you're looking for. So if you want to make a new video, or if you're thinking of having like flashing all over your channel, awesome. But just think about what you're testing it against and make sure that it's still in line with your brand and your tone that people have come to trust.
I don't know if I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I'm very curious to get your opinion on this. A blog from 2019 on why influencers are useless and damaging to your brand.
We're going there. Okay. You really like pulled up everything here. Okay. So that title was to make people click, right? Like that is a heated debate. So that title, first of all, was to make you feel something. It was to evoke an emotion in you. But the second thing was not just influencers are great, but it's to say that like people see through these things now. Like if I'm a mom and I hawk a new product every single day, am I really believing in the brand or am I making money for my family? Which is also okay, but just be transparent about that. And I found that influencers are amazing when it's kind of like a partnership, or they also believe in the brand or they've bought into the brand, right? So like for us, we invested in a company called Chewies. they're these kiwi chips, and I eat them all the time. So I'm like hawking them, but it's not because I'm actually, trying to make money from them. It's because I love them so much. And so with influencers, I hope we get to a place of more transparency. So like I said, if you're hawking a brand every hour, I'm not sure how much trust is there. And I also hope for a place of where people can believe in something, so like if I come to your page and all you do is talk about Diet Pepsi, well, then I probably believe that you really love this brand. It's in your household daily. You're a repeat offender of purchasing it. And it's not just the next company that's giving you money. So that was kind of more the lane I was trying to get to with that, is like, let's make this authentic and let's be real about this.
Yeah, no, 100%. I read the article, it was great. And
Oh,
no worries. So with me, it's always like I always try and preach like long-term partnerships. It's always like I always use the example of like in a YouTube's context of like you'll see these YouTubers promote a random like mobile app game for like a week and then they never mention it again. And I'm like, okay, well so it's just like I always laugh at those, but it's definitely the long-term ones. And it's interesting to watch influencers start to understand this and to really double down on like how much they believe in the company, which even they're getting pushback from founders though, is they're now starting to get equity instead of payment from the brands, like to really show like we want like a small piece of ownership, and then it can be like a really long-term thing, but then founders don't want to give up equity and it's a whole thing. But it's just interesting to see that that the longer term partnership is kind of ideally where I hope the industry is trending.
yeah. And do you remember the Fry Festival or the Fire
Fire,
Festival?
yes, yes.
So like, can you imagine if you were an influencer for that? You
Oh
know?
my goodness, yeah.
And so I'm with you. We have a company now, and if we partnered with somebody, an influencer, and they really believed in our brand and they were pushing it to everybody they knew, and they were in this with us for the long term, I would be super happy to give them an equity stake. No problem. If you believe in this as much as we do, and you want to help us grow this business, I'm super happy to have you on board and so happy to pay you for your efforts as well.
100%. I think like not to plug my sponsor slash client, but like with their platform, it's just interesting because I was building content for them around Oreo just because it's National Oreo Day. So I was making a thing for National Oreo Day. And I was
So,
looking at the people with the like biggest followings that have engaged with Oreo recently. And they're
yeah,
all verified and things like that. And then I was able to see which ones Oreos follow back. And Oreo follows none of them. And I was like, those are the people you need to be reaching out to, like these people with 1 million plus followers that are verified, that have engaged with your content, like that are doing it on their own before, like without you even following them. Follow them back and build that relationship. And that'll just be more authentic marketing than just reaching out to different random people. But
I mean, a strategy. You came up with a strategy. I love it.
yeah. And so for you specifically, your influencers are more so CEOs and business people, right? Not just like social media influencers, correct?
For which business? Sorry.
Just for you personally, like when you look to be like you, not like influencers is like a very broad term in this context, but like the people you look towards is more so CEOs and people who've exited companies and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, so I have a pretty big rule of thumb about who I follow and why I follow. First of all, if I'm following you, it's probably because I want to learn something from you, or we're friends, or we're family. But yeah, the people that I look up to are people who have got in the ring, taken their punches, and who can share their information. And again, I don't care if you failed. I don't care if you had a multi-billion-dollar company and then it went under. You still have a great story to share with me. But yeah, those are the influencers that I look up to, are people who are doing it and also making a change. The Tentry guys from Regina, Saskatchewan, I love buying their clothing. I feel good when I buy their clothing. I love what they're doing because they're giving back and trying to make this planet better. And so it's people like that that I'm very interested in.
On the kind of on the flip side of that, do you think we're at a place right now where entrepreneurship is a little bit glamorized? And
Oh, sure. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
I,
ask
ha-
any
go
entrepreneur, you quit your 9 to 5 because you don't want to work your 9 to 5 so that you can work a 9 to 2 in the morning job. It is awesome.
I saw I saw a post with that exact thing this morning. It's so true, but it's just like, how do you think? Like, do you think it's a bad thing for entrepreneurship, where everyone wants to be an entrepreneur? Is it like a net positive thing? Like, where do you think that kind of balances out to?
If you want to be an entrepreneur and you have a great idea and you have a business plan, I'm a teacher from Saskatchewan who completely pivoted and made my own company. So I'm not here. I'm living in a glass house. I'm not trying to throw stones. I just think, tech sexy and entrepreneur sexy, again, it looks so good on the outside because you're your own boss, you have your own hours, but those are some grueling hours. And again, the buck stops with you. So even, we've been on vacation and shit has blown up. And I mean, like, blown up. And so I couldn't get Wi-Fi in one of our hotels except for in the bathtub. So I would take my pillow at 3 a.m, sit in the bathtub, trying to like fix all this shit. And then come 7 a.m, my family still wants to go out and have fun, right? So it looks sexy and it sounds amazing, and it is for the most part, but man, you get ready for fun. I guess we'll just call it fun. It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's perfect. My next question is going to be hit me with the reality of being an entrepreneur, but I think that summarizes it better than anything. And I'm curious how, and for lack of a better word, like I don't like using the term female entrepreneur, because to me, you're just entrepreneur. Like,
Yep.
so for lack of a better word though, how does being a female that is an entrepreneur, how has that impacted you throughout your career?
What's so funny is I get asked that question a lot, and I don't know. I've always just been under the impression, I mean, maybe it's my naivety here, but I always just assumed that if I did the job and did it well, it would work. And it has. And I came from a very female dominated space, elementary school teacher, teacher in general, very female dominated space where I worked with men who did nothing but help me. When I started my own companies, men have done nothing but help me. And so I don't feel privileged to be a woman, but I also don't feel that hurts me in any way. Even growing our Gunkii company with my husband, we both jumped into fundraising, and he heard no, but I heard no. He heard yes. I also heard yes. So I just feel that I'm glad you started with what you started, and you don't want to call me a female entrepreneur, because we need to stop categorizing things that way. There can never be a them and an us anymore, because as soon as you put up that division, as soon as you put up segmentation, there's just one more person to feel, maybe negative about. And so we're all people, we're all in the business space. It doesn't matter what your color, heritage, sex is, just get the job done, do it well, be a kind human and help people.
And you mentioned fundraising for Gunkii, talking about where the idea for that whole company came from, like tongue scrapers, that is something that had never crossed my mind until I was prepping for this podcast. Like, where does that idea even come from?
You want to see? We have one here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this is our working prototype. Tongue scraping though. So that's actually my husband's brainchild. That is, my husband has been talking about tongue scraping since the day I met him. So, he was 20 at the time, he's now 60. But he's been talking about tongue scraping. It's part of the Ayurvedic system with the Indian roots. So a lot of East Indian people have been tongue scraping for a long time. So he was tongue scraping. I took his tongue scraper and started doing it. That's a little gross, a little intimate, so got my own. But we both just loved it. And he's been telling people about this for years. And then when COVID hit and he was let go from Eventbrite, he decided that he really wanted to do this company. So he came to me and said, I can't do it alone. Will you come 50-50 with me, help me fundraise, market, all the things? Obviously, I said yes. And we're off to the races. Yeah.
So are these tongue scrapers available now?
So we finally have 2 manufacturers that we really like. We're going to sign contracts with them, and they will be available on Kickstarter. So you can go to Kickstarter and help us launch the product and really, get involved as an early adopter. And hopefully, fingers crossed, all goes well in about 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So the Kickstarter starts in 2 to 3 weeks?
We're aiming for that unless something goes wrong. But yes, that's our
perfect.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Well, if it follows that 2 or 3 week timeline, it should be up before this episode does. So I'll make sure I throw it in the description as well. Yeah. So if anybody wants to support, like the link is down there so they can get their own tongue scraper. The intent with Gunkii, though, from my understanding, is not to exit from the business. It's almost to set up a 4-hour work week type situation. Is that correct?
So the thought process with Gunkii, first of all, is to build a company that has a social impact force behind it. And so we really want to be able to help children with cleft palate. And yes, initially it will be a day-to-day kind of lifestyle company, but we do want to grow this very large. We have other products that we will be making. The running joke is Gunkii is just kind of the umbrella. And then we will be building products to remove all the gunk off all your body parts. And I mean everything. So hopefully one day it will be acquired. But if not, Jayesh and I have so much fun running this together. Actually, I think I'm more of a pain in his ass, but I have so much fun doing this with him. So if this was our lifestyle brand forever, it'd be good.
That's awesome. And so how do you find manufacturer? Like how do you develop? I'm curious with because it's probably like a brand new product, like in terms of its design stuff. How do you design it? How do you get it manufactured? What does that process look like?
It's been a year. And it probably sounds crazy because in your head, you're probably like, come on, guys, it's a tongue scraper, right? It's a piece of metal, throw it together. There's already some on the market. Um, we wanted ours done in a very specific way. We obviously wanted less impact on the environment. We looked at partnering with people in Portugal. We really wanted it to be family focused, but we soon realized that there just are some limitations with that. So Portugal couldn't hit our manufacturing needs and couldn't design it the way we wanted to. China has been wonderful. We're working with some companies there that have family owned businesses, and they've been wonderful. So that's where we kind of landed. And oh man, it's been a process. We got some back and they broke. We got some back, they were too small. We tried to go to the United States. One tongue scraper from the United States cost $200. Madness. So we found a manufacturer in China, and it was literally just trial and error. How it actually started, we were going to do metal and silicone. So my son has these constructive plates. They're called constructive design, and they're actually plates and spoons that are in the shape of trucks, and it's a big construction thing. So I just called the marketing team from this constructive plates, and they helped me get in touch with so and so who does their stuff. And then that person couldn't help, so then we went on to the next person. And then they couldn't help, but they knew somebody in China who might be able to help us. And then we tapped one of our old Picatic team members who speaks Chinese and got him involved. So a lengthy process, but after a year, we have them.
And so after a year, that means this whole process was essentially happening during COVID, right?
Yeah.
How do you navigate trying to set up a business during COVID, also while adapting your marketing business? COVID, like you said, prices had to come down to things. Like, can you kind of talk to me about when the world kind of shut down, like how you kind of navigated through that?
So that's again one of those moments where you just head down and go, right? You have to go on autopilot, because if you actually think about all the things going wrong, you won't look forward to all the great things that can come. So we lost some clients at the time, which was devastating for our business. But as soon as businesses opened up, they came back plus more. So that was also a blessing. I took a moment to breathe and kind of clean up some things we wanted to change in the company. COVID hit. My husband didn't have a job, or like he wasn't working for Eventbrite. So we realized there's no better time for our family to start this tongue scraping company, because he has so much time. And when Jayesh loves something, you've met him. He is so dedicated, so head down. So he's been a really big driver. Yeah, COVID actually was the best thing that happened to our family. We got to spend more time together and start a company together.
That's amazing. And on top of you kind of when I mentioned the real estate company, you said you've got this on the go, this on the go, this on the go, this on the go. Starting the real estate courses again is just not on the radar. But on top of everything you're doing, when I was scrolling through your LinkedIn, it was like volunteer experience after volunteer experience after volunteer experience. Like, how do you find the time to fit that in there? And two, why is that a priority for you? Why do you make so much of your time that's already so filled to make sure you're volunteering?
I don't know. It goes back to how it felt in high school. It's giving back, right? Making sure I help kids, making sure I help the community. I feel that if everybody just did their part a little bit, we could leave this world so much better, you know? And so for me, it's important for me to be involved in my son's school. So I'm on the pack. It's important for me to be involved in the arts in the city, because if somebody's not advocating or helping, like what happens if that stops? And just because it's not your area or it's not your jam, it doesn't mean that art hasn't saved a lot of people either, musically, expressively, you name it. I volunteer for a lot of things because it's important to me. It's important to give back and make sure that I'm also building community, right? And when you build community and when you know a lot of people in the community, it makes you feel better about your home too. So yeah, we volunteer a lot.
Yeah. And then additionally, on top of everything else as well, you've got the JJ Binks books.
Yeah.
And those are different from the coffee table books, right? Like these are like a cartoon book for kids.
So these are books based on my son's life. So when he was growing up, I would just take notes of the things we did or the things that happened. And what was really interesting about that is I had parents write into me and say, well, I have a child who had a stroke when he was born, and nobody ever writes books about, this kind of invisible deficit of like this kid looks normal and he's fine, but he actually internally he's not the same. And so could we write a book about that? So we did. And then COVID hit, we wrote a book about that. And then a lot of our friends, started parting ways in life, and we had a lot of questions in our household. So we started writing about that. And so we wrote 50 children's books based on what we thought was important. And we got to have our book launch with Indigo. We were going to go and do word on the street, but then COVID hit. So hopefully next year we can jump back in and do that. We sold 78 books on Amazon in February. And so we're not really actively pushing it, but we are still so happy for all the supporters we have out there.
It's 50, like 50, not 15.
Yeah, 50. Yeah.
That's crazy. And so is it kind of like with Amazon, is that just where it's set up where they get printed as they get purchased? Or do you have to have like a stack of books at home somewhere that you're shipping out?
So we have a stack of books here for when people order off of our website, and then we ship to them, and we write a hand card thank you. On Amazon, we don't know who the buyer is. So thank you if you're listening. And yeah, Amazon takes care of everything. And then they just send us a check at the end of the month, which is amazing. And then they send you your tax forms in March, which is also amazing. They take care of everything.
These are just random questions that I didn't know where to fit them in. So I just kind of wrote random questions with these two questions. The first one is, can you tell me the story behind the Tay Time shirts?
Oh my gosh. Did you go through like my whole life back to Adida, Saskatchewan here? The Tay shirts. So I am a huge Taylor Swift fan, like love her, have every song of hers on repeat. I'm sure my husband and son think that's amazing. She came to a concert here, and I convinced my husband to go with me and two of our friends, Kurt and Lorna. And I made shirts. I made the boys bright pink, and they had her Times picture, and I made Lorna's and mine red. And we went to the concert, and we were pretty front row because, I mean, how else do you do it as, a pretty big fan? And she walked by us and she looked down and she was like, oh, and she kind of pointed. And then our friend Curtis, who wasn't really pumped about wearing a bright pink shirt, I think that's his claim to fame now. He's like, Taylor Swift saw me. But my husband told me he will never attend a concert with me again in a pink shirt.
That's amazing. My other random question, is it true you got hit by a car when you're going for a run?
Totally true. April, right after my birthday, 2020. So I was COVID times, I thought to myself, this is the best time to get in the best shape of my life. It was not. I went for a run, and I think the more comical thing about this is the car that hit me kitty corner from a fire hall. So the fire people, the first responders, just came running outside with all their bags. So yeah, I was just cooling down from a run. Thank goodness I wasn't on, like Spotify changing songs or anything. Everything was tucked down. I had the walk light and I started walking, but I realized I couldn't see the driver's eyes. And so I kind of just took a second, and sure enough, he sped up and he hit me. The really great thing is there was an SUV parked at the stop site on the different intersection, and they caught it all on their dash cam. So on the dash cam, you can see me get smacked by a car. You can see that I had the walk light and that he was texting. He was a lovely man. He lost his job also just due to COVID, and it was, I think, his first or second day driving for Uber. The most lovely human, and it can happen to anybody. Just a good reminder to put your technology away when you're driving. And I got hit by a car.
That's insane.
Wild, yeah.
I don't have a way to transition to my next question, so we're just going to jump to it. What did it mean to be named one of the 40 under 40?
That's just such an honor. It just when we do things in life, I'm not trying to get recognition. To be nominated for that and actually win, just makes my little heart feel so warm and fuzzy. It's just wonderful. There's some heavy hitters in that group, and just to be lumped in with those people is amazing. Because I don't think about those things. I'm not trying to win awards. But yeah, such a proud moment.
How often do you reflect on the entire journey? Like all the way back to San Francisco, no job, Picatic almost goes bankrupt. You start your business. Like, how often do you reflect on the whole journey?
Probably not as often as I should, because we're so looking forward. Like Jay, back to this type A personality of mine, we have this spreadsheet, and it shows us our next 7 years, and that's kind of basically all we have left with our son. And then it's the years after that, what we want to do and what we want to do. So I think reflecting on life would be really good. I every day I talk about the three things I'm grateful for, or when my husband and I talk about the things we're grateful for. Those things come up, and we just talk about what an exceptional journey that was, the incredible people we met, because those people still propel us, forward now. Um, but there's still so much we're looking forward to, right? Like I applied for a PhD, can't wait to hear about that. We're launching Gunkii, our new company. So there's just so much more to come that it's hard to look back and take stock of all the greatness that has also passed.
Mhm. That's crazy. Applied for a PhD. That's why it's just crazy. Like you're just proof that there is enough time in the day. It's just a matter of prioritization.
Yeah, that's all it comes down to. So for me, there's no Netflix. As you know, there's no social media unless it's for clients, and then it is literally, if I'm on treadmill, it's something. If I'm at home, it's finishing something. There is not a lot of downtime until I hit that pillow and I'm out. Yeah.
I'm curious, like, because I try to be like that, but there's always the bad days. And I always feel like if I'm not working, I'm falling behind because someone else is working when I'm not. How do you kind of get through the bad days?
Such a good question. For me, I try to reframe it as it's not a bad day. It's a catch up day for me, and it goes back to that analogy: is when you're on the airplane, you have to put your mask on first before you can help anybody. And if you need to take that day then do it. And I have, I have looked at my calendar some days and just been like, hell no, that is not happening today. And then I will contact clients, and just say like, something's come up. Can I? And I mean, it's never going to be professional to just say I am having a hell of a day and I can't do this right now. So I just say, something's come up. Can we reschedule? And some days you just need that, and some days I do. I go up and I go for a walk, get into nature, and that usually helps. Or just talk through some things with my husband. He's a great sounding board.
I think that's super important for people to hear that it's okay to have those days. And when those
Oh
days
yeah.
happen, just kind of like not necessarily embrace them, but like just be okay that they're happening. I think that's super important for people to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can embrace them, great, because that just means we're human and we're just having a day, and it happens to everybody. If you can embrace them, yeah, just know it's part of the journey. Totally normal.
Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you the same standard set of questions I ask everybody at the end of every interview.
Okay.
So I used to call it rapid fire, but people tell me after that they're not rapid fire type questions. So I stopped calling them rapid fire, but then I started calling it the Q&A. But then I was like, this is a podcast. The entire thing is a Q&A. That doesn't make sense. So I don't really know what these are called. But the first question is you're going to dinner. You can take three people. It can be anybody dead or alive. Who do you take to dinner?
Ooh, so good. I would take Elon Musk, Barack Obama, and Oprah Winfrey.
That'd be amazing.
Wouldn't it be the best forever?
So many heavy hitters. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
So much good advice. I feel that so many good nuggets. Fail forward, fail fast. Failure is a data point, so just go with it and don't get hung up on the weeds. The other one was, you'll never be criticized by people doing more, just people doing less. So don't take that to heart. And I think the best advice probably came from my parents, and who always just said, whatever you want to do, you can do. You are your only blocker.
What's one thing about you people wouldn't expect?
Ooh, I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty open book. I mean, I don't feel there's many secrets left here. um, what's one thing people can or don't expect from me? I don't think anything. I think what you see is what you get. And if you saw anything about me online, or if you talked to me for 2 seconds, you would get that I'm pretty open.
What's one thing that's so important everybody needs to know?
So important. You can change anything. It's important to know that no matter what your situation is, no matter what you're going through, you can change anything.
For the last question, I like to flip the script a little bit. So instead of me asking the question, it's you asking the question, but it's not to me.
Oh,
Pretend you have a crystal ball. You can ask this crystal ball any question, you'll get the 100% honest answer. What is one question you want to know the answer to?
I don't want to know. I no. I like surprises, and I like knowing that I don't know, because I think if I knew the answer to something, I'd be trying differently to get there, you know? So I don't want to know anything. Let's just take it as it comes.
I respect that answer because I think about it in a very similar context. Like I think almost like the butterfly effect. Like if I know something's going to happen, is it going to cause me to operate differently, which means that's not actually going to happen, or then I just get way too deep into it. So I'm always curious to see like what people answer. So I like some people sometimes say they don't want an answer, and I always think that's my answer to the question. So it's cool when I hear that. So, but no, I want to thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast. I want to give you the floor. Where can the people find you? Where can they find the business? Plug anything and everything you got right now.
Type in Nicole Parmar. If you're looking for me, head to the website. You'll find everything you can there. I want to thank you for having me. Is there anything I can do to help you? Is there anything I can do to help your business right now?
I don't think so. I mean, like, only thing I can think of is if there's anybody you know that has a cool story. I'm always looking for people with cool stories for the podcast. But like beyond that, like, I just appreciate your time. It means the world.
Thanks. I will send you some people with some pretty cool stories, and if it works, great.
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate that. But no, I want to thank you once again. And I want to thank everybody for listening, whether you've listened the entire way through or you only listen to bits and pieces. I really appreciate taking time to check this out. Everyone, do me a favor, go and check out Nicole's website. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below so you can find it. Support the Kickstarter as well for Gunkii. If that is out there, it'll be linked in the show notes. So make sure you check that out as well. If you'd like to follow me, you can find me everywhere on social media at the Jacob Kelly. Feel free to come and say hello. My DMs are always open. As always, today's podcast is powered by TRUFAN. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.